Greetings, travelers. Yes, it's me back for another fun-filled mini-sode. One of the most common questions I get from you all the time is what scares Mark, right? I think that's probably been the most asked question. Or second, maybe, where is the scariest place you've gone? That's one of the things I always talk about is that I'm not scared of Bigfoot. I'm not scared of aliens. I'm not scared of ghosts. I mean, they are all interesting things and I'm intrigued by them. And I'm sure I would sense some level of fear encountering the unknown. I've had several encounters with strange things that have given me, as Buffy used to call, the Wiggins on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I've definitely gotten some spooky feelings at places, but probably I'm more afraid of being hurt by people. As we've often said, man is the scariest monster. I'm worried that I might get hurt or robbed. I've been robbed a couple times in my life, and I've been in some fights. I've been shot. I've been stabbed. Those are long stories for another day, but I've survived all those. And honestly, I'm scared of those things happening again. But the thing that scares me the most is what I'm going to be talking about today, which is the title of the episode, if you guys have scrolled through and saw it. And that is broken arrows. And the fact that they even have that term terrifies me. Some of you may remember the 1996 movie with John Woo. One of the things when we moved to North Carolina, people are like, oh, be careful. There's an area where there's a lost nuclear weapon. And I was like, what? It's on the other coast, far away from us, but still dangerous area. So I'm going to talk about that one. And then I'm going to talk about the fact that there are others out there. So what a broken arrow is when we lose track of a nuclear weapon. Sometimes it's when there's an incident involving a nuclear device or something like that that is uncontrolled. So that it comes to mean both those things. But the fact that we have some missing weapons out there and they're still missing, we kind of know where they are, but that's terrifying. And that's just the US ones. So we'll get into this in a little bit after the break, but I want to just start this basic thing with, we're going to get in the Wayback Machine and we're going to go back to January 24th, 1961. So this is during the Cold War. Russia and the US were on this program called Mutual Assured Destruction. Basically, we didn't want to start a war because we knew both sides would be destroyed. That's how many bombs we had out there, how many missiles we had out there, all this crazy stuff going on. So on that morning, January 24th, 1961, there were 8 men that were in a B-52 Stratofortress, and they were patrolling over North Carolina. And they had a payload of 2 Mark 39 thermonuclear bombs on board. Now, this patrol was part of us being ready in case the Soviets did a surprise attack. If they did a surprise nuclear attack, the bombers would have been tasked with heading over to Russia and dropping its payload over Soviet targets. They probably didn't know the targets at the time. They were in sealed orders on the plane. That would be the things they did. But they just kept these planes in the air as long as they could and as fueled as they could so they could head out and complete their missions should the worst happen. During one of these mid-air refuelings, the tanker crew was looking down at the B-52, and that's the plane that's fueling them, and they note that, hey, you guys have a fuel leak, and we have to abort the operation. And so they stopped refueling them. And then the B-52 realized, oh gosh, our leak is getting worse. So there is definitely a major leak. And we also didn't get to refuel as much as we did. So they were ordered to return to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. Now, as the aircraft is descending on its approach, it's right now about 10,000 feet, and it was coming in, and the pilots just lost control. No one says why in the reports, just they've lost control of the aircraft, and they become ordered to abandon the aircraft. So as the bomber's beginning to break apart in midair, they lost control of its bomb bay doors, and the 2 nuclear bombs that it was carrying separated from the aircraft. They dropped. Now, one of the bombs had a parachute, and it activated, and it slowly comes down safely and snags on a tree where the military crews found it. Now, the parachute of the other bomb failed, and it slams into a swamp, just a muddy field, and it's broken into pieces. Now, did not detonate, and it took about a week of digging for the military to recover most of it. And they realized it had broken into so many pieces. When they studied the bomb, they realized that it had 7 steps for automated activation. That means it would detonate in a thermonuclear explosion. 1 trigger of the 7 failed. That means 6 activated. And we were very close to having that last one go off. It did switch to arm, but somehow failed to detonate. So 1 crossed wire would have just made that bomb explode just outside of Goldsboro, North Carolina. Now, Ed Pilkington, and he was interviewed in 2013, and he said the lethal fallout of that bomb would have deposited all over Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and probably as far north as New York City, putting untold millions of lives at risk. Now, all that said, they found the bomb, right? But part of it has never been recovered. Its secondary core, which is filled of non-weapons grade uranium-238 and a little bit of weapons grade uranium-235, is buried in mud around 200 feet deep in that field. And they can't get it out of there. It is so deep and so radiated. So what they did was the Army Corps of Engineers purchased a circular easement around it over the designated location, and they prevent any building on the land, any digging on the land, although they do allow farming on the land, which is crazy to me. I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is wild that is there, right? The fact that there are 6 missing U.S. weapons is just a little bit terrifying, right? That's crazy to me. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to list the other 5. And we'll go a little bit more into what a broken arrow is. That terrifies me. And we're back. It's crazy. One of the quotes from that great movie, Broken Arrow, I love John Woo movies. They're amazing. But the quote is, I don't know what's scarier, losing nuclear weapons or that it happens so often that there's actually a term for it. That's crazy. Between 1950 and 1980, there were 32 documented nuclear weapon accidents that involved unexpected accidental launchings, firings, detonatings, theft, or loss of the weapons. And 6 are still not recovered as of this day. So we'll start with the first one, February 13th, 1950. This is the longest missing nuclear weapon, and now passing, it is, yes, over 75 years this thing's been missing. It's never going to be found. It's very unlikely to be found. It was lost when a crew of a United States Air Force Convair B-36 bomber was conducting a mock nuclear strike. It was traveling from Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska to Carswell Air Force Base in Texas, and it developed engine trouble. And they didn't want to crash with a nuclear warhead because heck no. So they dropped its 30 kiloton Mark IV, which is basically a Fat Man bomb, deep into the Pacific Ocean. Now, according to the official report, the bomb did not contain the plutonium core necessary for a nuclear detonation, but it did still contain a substantial amount of uranium. Now, they've not been able to find that one at all. No recovery efforts have even come close. So March 10th, 1956. So this is just 6 years later. 2 nuclear cores were lost when a B-47 bomber crashed somewhere into the Mediterranean Sea away from MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida, to Ben Guerir Air Force Base in Morocco. And it had completed its first aerial refueling, but it did not make contact with the tanker for the second refueling and is just reported missing. Now, we don't know exactly which weapon are missing on that one, but those B-47s around that time frame carried usually the 3,400 kilogram Mark 15 nuclear bombs. No trace of the plane nor the cores have ever been found. Now, February 5th, 1958, just under 2 years later, a simulated combat mission near Savannah, Georgia, another Air Force B-47 bomber, this one was carrying a Mark 15 weapon, collided with an F-86. Basically, after many attempts to land, the bomber crew was given the green light to jettison the bomb to reduce the weight and to ensure it wouldn't explode during an emergency landing. Now, the bomb was dropped near Wausau Sound, which is near the mouth of the Savannah River. It has never been recovered. There are men who have been out there trying to find this thing for decades. They even troll a Geiger counter behind them. They've had a few hits, but it's been natural stuff. We kind of know the area where it's been. They've interviewed the original pilots. They've done a lot of work on this. It's still not been found. And that's scary to know that it's just off the Georgia coast. Now, our 1961 incident, we talked about that one. That's the one in Goldsboro, North Carolina. Now, December 5th, 1965, so this is just about 4 years after the Goldsboro incident, an A-4E Skyhawk attack aircraft had a 1 megaton thermonuclear weapon, and it rolled off the deck of the USS Ticonderoga and fell into the Pacific Ocean. There was a pilot on board, the plane, and the bomb, and they basically just fell off the boat and sank into 16,000 feet of water. None of them have ever been seen. In fact, it wasn't until about 15 years later, in 1980, that the U.S. Navy even admitted that that had even happened. And even then they said, oh, it took place, 500 miles away from land. And that wasn't true. It was about 80 miles away from Japan's island chain. Because of that, the Japanese government now prohibits the United States from bringing nuclear weapons anywhere in their territory. So who can blame them? The story of that one is pretty interesting because the crew of the carrier saw that happening and they tried to stop the pilot and have him apply the brakes, but he didn't see him or just was too late. We don't know. Again, the fact that they hid this one is kind of scary. Now, spring of 1968, this is the final one to be lost and not recovered, occurred basically sometime in the first half of 1968. It did involve the loss of the U.S. Navy's nuclear attack submarine, the USS Scorpion. It sank about 400 miles into the southwest of the Azores. And that's 99 crew members lost, but it also was carrying a pair of nuclear-tipped weapons. Both had yields up to 250 kilotons. So terrifying. Now, as scary as all that is, the plus side is that it's been 50 years and no other nuclear weapons have been lost, at least that they've told us, right? There have been other accidents. Again, this is the U.S. announcing these accidents, some in the 90s, where a missile launch malfunction occurred during a test on a Typhoon-class nuclear ballistic missile sometime in 1991 near the White Sea. 1993, the Barents Sea, a nuclear-powered sub collided with a Russian nuclear-powered sub. Both vessels reported only minor damage. And that's just the stuff we know about, right? This is the stuff that they tell us about. There's the big one in 2000s was an Oscar Class 2 submarine, the Kursk, which we all know about. It sank after a massive onboard explosion. They were unable to rescue the 118 men, and they thought it was a torpedo failure. Radiation levels right now are normal, and we don't think that submarine had any nuclear weapons on board, but the fact it's a nuclear submarine out there. And that's just it. There's tons and tons of these. There's been over 32 nuclear weapon accidents known as broken arrows. Unexpected event involving nuclear weapons. That's just insane to me. So when you're out there and you're worried about Bigfoot, you're worried about UFOs, you're worried about aliens, no. Be worried about the threat that there could be nuclear weapons that are just lost and that we don't know what they are or where they are. That's terrifying to me. You want to know what scares me? That scares me. I've actually gotten over my fear of clowns, so that makes me happy. But thank you once again, patrons. Thank you once again, listeners. I hope you enjoy these mini-sodes. We've been having a blast with them. I've got more stories to tell, more things to go, and I don't know. So when you're traveling, keep your eyes on the skies, keep watching the woods for Bigfoot, and document anything you see. And don't worry, at least now the nuclear missiles all have pinging devices so we can find them. And we'll see you on the other side.